Growing up, I often felt overshadowed, with my parents distant and preoccupied with work. Books became my refuge, offering an escape from the loneliness that followed me into my teenage years. I craved connection, someone to fill the emptiness I carried with me. That all changed when I met Anne-Marie Santos in middle school. She brightened my life, and our friendship quickly evolved into a romance that lasted through high school, college, and eventually marriage. I knew from the start that I wanted her in my life forever, despite my parents' concerns. We were close, but maintained our own lives, yet the moments we shared were always the most special. She was my best friend, and I made her my wife. Anne-Marie and I were opposites in many ways. She was outgoing, I was reserved. She was athletic, and I was more academic. Despite our differences, we had a genuine connection that kept us together. We never forced our relationship, but we always prioritized each other, sharing everything from dreams to fears. I wasn't sure if I believed in soulmates, but if they existed, she was mine. When I asked her father for her hand in marriage, he questioned everything, and I had to prove my love for her. I made a choice to love her, through good times and bad. Unfortunately, the worst came only 3 years later. I still loved her and wanted her happiness, even if it meant sacrificing my own. In recent months, Anne-Marie had become distant, coming home late and no longer smiling when she saw me. The realization that the person you love no longer loves you is devastating. One evening, she quietly entered the dining room, and I noticed the change in her demeanor. "Hi, Annie." "Hey, Gavin. Are you okay?" "Not really. Please sit so I can explain." I had rehearsed this moment, knowing I had to make the hardest decision of my life, letting you go. "Annie, I love you and always will. I don't want to argue or accuse. I just want us to decide together what's best, okay?" "Of course, Gavin. What's going on?" Her anxious eyes gave her away. "Annie, I've always wanted your happiness, but I know you're not happy with me." She teared up, and oddly, it was a comfort to see she was upset. "I don't want to dig into details. It'll just hurt more. But if we can agree you're unhappy, it'd mean a lot," she whispered. "Yes, Gavin, I know. Thank you. Your honesty reassures me I'm making the right choice. I want a divorce." Miguel Santos was a man I respected deeply. He and his wife, Maria, raised 8 kids in a small house in a tough neighborhood. He was strong and tough, but it was his loyalty to his family that impressed me most. I owed him an explanation, so I sat with him on his porch over a few beers and finally told him, "Mio, why are you here?" "It's harder than I thought. Sir, I've loved no one but your daughter since I first met her. I promised you I'd always put her first, and that's what I'm doing now, even though I'm leaving Anne-Marie." As expected, he was angry, mixing English and Spanish in his demand for an explanation I couldn't fully give. "Sir, I love your daughter, but some things have to stay between us. It hurts to admit our marriage has failed, but I believe it's for the best. I wanted you to hear it from me." Eventually, he calmed down enough to let me share some details. Though upset and embarrassed, he allowed me to leave without further confrontation. Anne-Marie didn't cry or argue, and while I was relieved, a small part of me wished she'd begged me to stay. But she didn't, and that confirmed my decision. Her only reaction was when I mentioned talking to her father. "I spoke to your dad today and explained what I'm about to tell you. I hope we can part ways quickly. I don't want financial ruin on top of everything else. I've prepared the paperwork for dividing our assets, especially the house. Please review them and let me know by next week." "Okay, Gavin, I'll review them." I can already hear the criticism. Why not go after her and her lover? First, I don't have those skills. The last fight I got into was in high school when someone made Anne-Marie cry. I almost got expelled for it, but Miguel Santos helped keep things quiet. The second reason was my own mental health. I was a wreck, losing sleep, and almost got fired. I had no one to turn to. My mom died of chest cancer in college, and my dad, who became a hard drinker, moved to Florida and cut off contact. I needed a fresh start, and to do that, Anne-Marie had to agree to the divorce. I was only 25 and needed to rebuild my life. Revenge wasn't on my mind. 2 weeks later, we sat in the attorney's office. Anne-Marie gave up the house, which we agreed to sell. We split our accounts, and she kept the new car while I kept my old truck. Everything was settled except for the 90-day waiting period. The only thing I regretted was lying to Anne-Marie. "Where are you going to live, Gavin?" "I rented a small apartment near the office. I'll stay there until I figure things out." "Good. I guess I'll see you at the house closing, right?" "Absolutely. See you soon, Annie." In reality, I wasn't staying. My truck was packed, and I left my wedding ring on the kitchen table with a note that read, "Goodbye. I will always love you. Be happy." Before leaving town, I said goodbye to Miguel Santos. "Mijo, you and Anne-Marie belong together. Can't there be forgiveness? Remember your vows?" "Yes, it's too fast." "Sir, I've forgiven her in my heart. I love your daughter, but I need peace." Maria Santos hugged me at the door. As she let me go, she softly said, "God bless you, mijo. I will miss you." I left quickly before I broke down. When your spouse is unhappy, it's helpful to know why, but I had no clue. Little things had come up, like leaving the toilet seat up, but recently we hadn't even argued. I thought maybe she was stressed with work, but she said she'd be fine. Trying to improve things, I did more around the house, cooking, dishes, laundry, hoping she'd notice. After a few weeks, I even cleaned the bathroom, a chore I hated. If I hadn't cleaned it, I might not have found out. I wouldn't have emptied the trash and discovered the pregnancy test. I dug deeper and found a positive test, then checked the birth control pills. They were untouched. That's when I realized another man had gotten my wife pregnant. But who? It didn't take long to figure out. I called Anne-Marie, intending to ask, but her number was forwarded to the front desk. They said she had already left. Her car was still in the lot, so I drove to her office. About 20 minutes later, my hope that she had an accident vanished. 30 minutes later, I had my answer. Her boss, Michael James, pulled up next to her car. They kissed openly. My smile, once hers, was now for someone else. That was all I needed to know. I got home ahead of her and hid my feelings that night. She barely looked my way. In just over 2 hours, I knew my marriage was over and realized it was a 20-hour drive to Las Vegas. I made the trip in 4 days, driving through Nebraska, Colorado, and Utah. The peaceful scenery slowed me down, and I wasn't sure if my truck could handle the terrain. On the 4th day, I checked into a hotel, slept for 18 hours, and spent the next day filling out housing applications. Less than a week earlier, I was a newly divorced 25-year-old with no family. Now I was a first-year law student in a dorm room, starting a new life. I wish I could share stories of new adventures after college, but the reality was different. I had no experience dating. Gavin and Anne-Marie had always been a pair. I had no idea where to start. During law school, I never went on a single date or made close friends. If anyone showed interest, I missed the signs. Instead, I buried myself in studies, using school as an escape. I spent 4 years earning my Juris Doctor and MBA, aiming for a 4.0 GPA. Anne-Marie and I once talked about going back to school when we were financially stable. So, when I moved on, I took the LSAT, applied to schools, and got accepted in Las Vegas with a full scholarship. I didn't know much about the school or the city, just that it was far from home. Once a month, I'd write to Mr. and Mrs. Santos about my studies. It was a habit I picked up from my parents, perhaps out of routine or a need to feel someone cared. 13 weeks into my first semester, I received a package confirming the exact value of my broken heart, $7,642 after fees. It was probably the third most depressing day of my life. Occasionally, I'd get an email from Miguel or Maria Santos. I never told them where I really was, and they never asked. They'd share updates about their other children, but never about Anne-Marie, letting me imagine I still had a family that cared. For the first 6 or 7 months, I kept in touch. They never explicitly mentioned forgiveness or reconciliation, but hinted at it until, suddenly, the hints stopped. I never doubted Anne-Marie would keep her baby. But I wondered if she'd tell her parents the truth before it became obvious. I also wondered if Michael James would leave his wife and 3 kids to do right by Anne-Marie. I didn't have the courage to ask, but I knew a child born to a black man wouldn't look like me. I felt like a coward when I sent flowers, balloons, and a gift basket to the James home, congratulating them on the baby. I sent a duplicate to Anne-Marie's office, addressed to the company president. I promised myself I wouldn't stoop to hurting anyone, even Michael James, but the pain was too much. I didn't spread rumors, just offered my congratulations. I was genuinely happy for Anne-Marie, knowing she was working toward her dream of a big family. But I couldn't ignore that her happiness came at the cost of my pain. Without knowing what happened after my gifts, I imagined a disastrous outcome for Michael James, however unlikely. This small, cowardly act allowed me to close that chapter of my life. I was still hurting, but it was over. My social life suffered for years after the divorce. My first real friend was a colleague 20 years older. I joined a small law firm specializing in real estate, where I found I had a knack for contracts, numbers, and eventually, people. Gavin, people need to trust you to solve their problems. They hand you the keys to their dreams, and you have to deliver. You've got a gift, and I'll help you use it. David Rothschild, the senior partner, became more than just my boss. He was my mentor and life coach. A legend in real estate law, he was known for negotiating multi-million-dollar deals. He made me his next project, and just 90 days into my career, he gave me my first evaluation. Gavin, you're dedicated and meticulous. You do excellent work. Thank you, Mr. Rothschild. But as a person, you're completely out of touch. Are you 30 or 90? Let's go for a walk. That's how our weekly Gavin project meetings began. Rothschild was brilliant. He'd ask questions, let me talk, and share stories. I opened up about everything: my life, parents, law school, and Anne-Marie. We have a lot to work on, but also a lot to work with. Now, let's get back to the office. At first, I didn't understand his motives, but after 3 years, the results were clear. His subtle guidance helped me grow. I started going to the gym, learning to cook, making better investments, and buying real estate. Without his help, I might have had a nice middle-class life. With it, I became a confident, successful business person. Rothschild never wanted credit, saying, "Watching you succeed is thanks enough." I worked with Rothschild for almost 5 years. After helping me succeed in business, he turned his focus to my personal life. One day, he casually asked, "Gavin, what are you getting your parents for their anniversary?" I was confused since both my parents had passed away, and he knew that. "Come on, Gavin. Next month, Miguel and Maria Santos will be married for 50 years. Only a jackass wouldn't mark an event like that." He was right. The Santos were like parents to me. I kept in touch with them, sending messages and gifts. For their 50th anniversary, I gave them the best: first-class airfare, a 5-star hotel stay, a limo, fine dining, and VIP show tickets in Las Vegas. I sent it with a note: "Happy anniversary. Use these as you wish. Love, Gavin." I didn't expect anything in return, so I was surprised when I received a call at noon the next day. "Gavin O'Connor," I answered. "Oh, mijo, what a wonderful surprise." "But this is too much," Mrs. Santos exclaimed. "Mrs. Santos, it's lovely to hear from you, but you and your husband deserve this, and I'm honored to give it to you," I replied warmly. "Oh, Gavin, you've always been such a wonderful boy. Un momento. Miguel wants to talk," she said, handing the phone to her husband. "Gavin," Mr. Santos began. "Yes, sir," I responded, knowing what was coming. "Gavin, this is too much. I can't let you go to such lengths. I can't imagine the cost. It's too much," he continued, his words rushing out. "Senor Santos, Miguel, Papa," I interrupted gently. "Yes, Gavin," he replied, finally pausing. "This gift doesn't even begin to repay the kindness you've shown me over the years. It brings me joy to give it to you. Please accept it in the spirit it was intended," I said sincerely. After a brief silence, he responded, "Si, mijo, we accept." "Wonderful. Happy anniversary," I said, feeling relieved. The conversation shifted to the trip details, and I explained all the highlights I thought they'd enjoy. After exchanging many words of gratitude and love, we ended the call, and for the first time in nearly a decade, I felt a sense of peace. As I reflected on that, I noticed Rothschild standing in my doorway with a big grin on his face. "Damn ungrateful kids," he teased. "Shut up, old man," I shot back with a smile. The Santos vacation didn't unfold as I had expected. I assumed they'd use the gift for sightseeing, fine dining, and relaxation. They did, but they insisted I join them every step of the way. It was clear they hadn't even been in their room for 5 minutes before my phone rang. "Gavin O'Connor," I answered again. "Mijo, when are you coming to see us?" Mrs. Santos asked eagerly. "Hello, Mrs. Santos. How was the flight?" I inquired, trying to buy a moment to think. Good. Miguel says we need to rest for a bit, but then we're ready to go." "When will you be here?" she pressed. "I can be there in about an hour," I replied, realizing I'd have to rearrange my day. "Great, mijo. See you then," she said cheerfully before hanging up. Honestly, I hadn't planned on spending much time with the Santos during their trip. They had plenty to do, and I had a pile of work on my desk. I was figuring out how to manage my schedule when Rothschild walked in with 2 paralegals. "Gavin, I've given you some time off. You need a break. Now get out of here and don't come back for a week or you're fired," Rothschild commanded, leaving no room for argument. The paralegals quickly packed up my work and cleared my desk. "Gavin, spend time with your parents. I'll handle the rest," Rothschild said, his tone softer but firm. So I did. The Santos insisted on visiting my office, though. Rothschild, who rarely joked about work, seemed ready for us when we arrived. He gave the Santos a personal tour, introducing them as my parents. In the conference room, he spent nearly an hour talking about my work, praising my accomplishments, and treating them like royalty. It was heartwarming to see the Santos beaming with pride, especially Maria, who kept patting my hand every time someone complimented me. "We're so proud of you, mijo." The rest of the week followed the same pattern. Rothschild's influence was evident everywhere we went. I had chosen the limo, resort, restaurants, and shows based on my business connections, but Rothschild ensured we were treated like VIPs. We were welcomed by owners and directors who shared stories of how I'd helped them and offered us the best seats, wine, and service. It was impressive. Mr. and Mrs. Santos, I have to admit this week has been more eventful than I expected. I know these people, but I've never received this level of service before. My daily life is much simpler. Gavin, it's wonderful that you have so many friends who wanted to show us how special you are. We always knew you were special, and we've always been proud to call you that. Maria couldn't finish, so Miguel stepped in. Our son, you are who you are and always will be. You took an oath before God that made you part of our family, and you fulfilled that vow. You've been a constant in our lives since you were a baby, and we've had the honor of watching you grow into a fine man. A father couldn't ask for more. Gavin, we love you and are very proud of you. Miguel Santos had aged, but his strength was still formidable. His hug felt like he might break a rib, and moments later Maria joined in, giving me a long-awaited family moment that filled me with joy. Their visit flew by, and I was sad to see them go, but I promised to visit them soon after handling some business. Rothschild knew exactly what I needed. I returned to work motivated, and when I shared my idea, he just smiled and gave his approval. The project was small and wouldn't generate long-term income, but it was probably the most important one I'd ever undertaken. In 6 weeks, I completed almost all the title deeds, secured a buyer with full financing, and made a few key phone calls. Armed with new information, I booked a flight back to my hometown for the first time in nearly 10 years. At the airport, I met Amy and Lydia, who worked at a coffee kiosk. I overheard them talking about their broken appliances and unresponsive landlord. When Amy handed me my coffee, I gave her my card with instructions. I overheard your conversation. I think I can help. Call the number and ask for Marcus. Tell him Gavin sent you and that you need Melvin's help. He'll take it from there. If you need help finding a new place, Marcus can assist. I've written everything on the back. As my flight was called, I added, don't worry about the cost. Just use the number. Good luck. Why did I offer to help them? Simple. I've seen a lot of bad landlords in real estate, and Rothschild taught me that real estate isn't a zero-sum game. The best deals benefit everyone. A few calls, a letter, and some work from a paralegal could get these girls out of a bad situation. We did pro bono work from time to time, and this was no different. I sent Marcus a quick email so he wouldn't be caught off guard when the call came. The flight to Omaha was short. I got my rental car and luggage, then drove around the city. Not much had changed, though it no longer felt like home. I passed through the Santos' neighborhood, where most houses were in disrepair except for theirs. The area had clearly been neglected. My destination was a new condominium complex with condos above retail spaces, restaurants, a theater, and stores, including a grocery store. The design was unique to the area, and everything seemed perfect. The apartment I had was brand new, with 2 bedrooms, a spacious open living area, a den, and a large balcony overlooking a park. The master suite was spa-like, with a jetted tub and a large tiled shower. The place was beautifully furnished with top-of-the-line fixtures and appliances, a few personal touches, and it would feel like home. The Santos met me for dinner at one of the restaurants, arriving on time and dressed for a night out. We had a great dinner, filled with laughter, hoping the rest of the evening would be just as enjoyable. Miguel and Maria Santos, both 67, had been married for 50 years. They were still young at heart, but showed signs of a lifetime of hard work. During our time in Las Vegas, I learned they were ready to retire, but worried about their finances and living in a neighborhood surrounded by crime and abandoned houses. My goal was to change that. As Rothschild reminded me, this is what children do for their parents. I invited the Santos back to the condo for a late-night party. When we stepped into the elevator, they looked surprised. I didn't know this was a hotel, mijo. These rooms must be expensive. Yeah, we need to talk about that. When I opened the apartment door, they were impressed with the room. I had asked their 7 children to describe the Santos dream home, and I made sure to cover all their preferences. Their attention then shifted to the champagne. Are we celebrating? Yes, I hope so. What's the occasion? I popped the cork. Your retirement and new home. I raised my glass and gestured around the room. "Oh my goodness, this is too much. We can't accept it. It's not a gift, but you'll have more than enough to buy it. Please sit down and let's discuss it." They were hesitant, but things were going well. "When we sign these documents, we'll form a partnership, the Santos Investment Group. First, we'll close on 19 properties near your house. Then we'll package those with your current home, request a zoning change, and sell them to Property Management International, which plans to build a hotel and retail space next to the new arena. We'll receive the sale proceeds within 90 days. I showed them the highlighted dollar amount on the paper. They were shocked. "This apartment is rented for the next 3 months with an option to buy. Here's the cost." I handed them another paper. "Half of the remaining profits will fund a lifetime annuity for you both, with monthly dividends." I showed them the third paper. "You'll be able to retire comfortably in your new home. I'm just offering business advice and free legal services." They wouldn't become rich, but they'd never have to work again. It was a silver parachute, and it would be enough. "Gavin, how did you manage this so quickly?" "Buying the property next to yours took some effort, but Rothschild found a buyer through his connections. A new casino is being built across the river in Iowa, so we negotiated the price based on that. The zoning change will happen with the help of our buyer's contacts on the city council. The rest is just a solid investment." Maria cried but smiled, and Miguel shook his head in disbelief. "It's a miracle, more than we could have imagined," Anne-Marie's voice echoed with genuine surprise. "No one deserves it more than you two," I replied, offering sincere congratulations. I hadn't seen or heard from Anne-Marie in 10 years. Her parents and siblings never mentioned her, and she had faded from my thoughts long ago. But when I saw her again, it was as if I had awakened from a deep sleep. I had loved her throughout my youth and early adulthood, but now I felt nothing. Our meeting was entirely coincidental. I needed to pick up a few things for an upcoming trip, and the new mall had one of my favorite stores. While browsing, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "You have great taste," Anne-Marie said, her tone a mix of surprise and nostalgia. I turned to find her looking much as I remembered, older, with a less radiant smile and a few extra pounds. She was simply a more mature version of the woman I once married. "Hi, Anne-Marie," I greeted her, not quite sure what to expect. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. "I'm shopping. And you?" I responded, keeping the conversation light. "Oh, I work here now," she explained. "I meant, why are you in town?" "Just finishing up some business and visiting old friends," I answered. "Was I on your list of friends to visit?" she asked, her tone half joking but with a hint of hope. "Honestly, no," I admitted. "Oh, okay. Nice to see you, Gavin," she said, a touch of disappointment in her voice. "You too, Anne-Marie," I replied, thinking that would be the end of it. Awkward, but manageable. I didn't expect to see her again, but as I was leaving, I noticed her at the cash register. After finishing her transaction, she approached me again. "Gavin, how long will you be in town?" she asked, a bit more tentatively this time. "Maybe a few days," I replied, still unsure where this was going. "Do you think we could get together and talk, at least a little?" she asked, handing me her card. "I'll think about it," I said, taking the card but not committing to anything. I walked away without another word. I had moved on and didn't have anything more to say to her. Yet, against my better judgment, 2 nights later, I found myself sitting alone in a booth at one of my favorite bars. This was a place where Anne-Marie and I used to meet friends after work on Fridays. It felt different now. When she arrived, she was dressed up, wearing a little black dress that showed off her curves, black heels, and carefully done makeup. If she'd been a stranger, I might have bought her a drink. She looked good. I didn't stand when she slid into the booth across from me. She waited a few moments before speaking. "You lied to me," she began, her voice tinged with accusation. "And you lied to me first," I retorted, both of us knowing exactly what the other meant. She looked momentarily embarrassed before continuing. "I didn't think you'd actually leave town. I hoped we'd have a chance to talk," she confessed. "What would have been the point?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "I don't know, but I wasn't happy when you left," she admitted, her voice softening. "Well, you didn't give me a choice, so I don't feel guilty about your unhappiness," I replied, my tone blunt but honest. She seemed surprised by my frankness, but I wasn't interested in sugarcoating the past. "Gavin, I never stopped loving you, even after what I did," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I sighed, sensing that she was about to revisit old wounds. "Anne-Marie, the only good thing about our divorce was that you never lied to me, probably because I didn't give you a chance. But I won't sit here if you're going to lie now. What do you even want? Why are we sitting here? Nothing will change what happened. But you never fought for me. You just gave up without even arguing. It was so unexpected. Why did you leave without trying? I thought you loved me. We'll have to agree to disagree. From my view, you gave up on me without a word. You abandoned me without a chance to fix things. I just put it in writing. That was a mistake, Gavin. I made a huge mistake, and I'm sorry, okay? Anne-Marie's voice wavered as she spoke, her eyes pleading for forgiveness. I groaned inwardly. The years apart had given me clarity, but it seemed they had left Anne-Marie clinging to delusions. Nonsense, I shot back, refusing to let her rewrite history. Her eyes watered, but I knew everything she said was a lie. Just because things didn't turn out as you hoped doesn't mean you can rewrite history, I continued. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending you care. I did care, Gavin. I loved you. I still love you, she insisted, her voice thick with emotion. You honestly believe that? I asked, incredulous. It's true, Gavin, she affirmed, her gaze steady. Okay, let's explore that, I said, leaning forward. Was it you or Michael James who decided I should be deprived of sex with my loving wife? She looked me in the eye, a flicker of shame crossing her face, but mostly reluctance to answer. It was him, she finally admitted. So your endless love for me let you sleep with another man and follow his wishes, knowing it would hurt me, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Gavin, she started, but I cut her off. How long did you wait before stopping birth control? I demanded. What? Well, she stammered. You didn't accidentally get pregnant. You wanted him to father your child. When were you planning to tell me? Or were you going to pretend it was mine? I pressed, watching her squirm. She didn't bother to answer. Why aren't you with him? Where is he? I asked, shifting the focus. He didn't want me, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. His wife found out, and so did his boss. His wife divorced him, and he had to resign. He left me. I had to quit my job, too. It was too embarrassing. And I'm supposed to feel bad? Why? I asked, my tone icy. I don't know, Gavin, she said, her voice breaking. I made a mistake, got involved in something bad and couldn't stop. I know I was wrong. Can't you forgive me? I love you. I died the day you left and missed you ever since. I wanted you to come back, to give me a chance to apologize, to tell you I'd never do it again. I'm all alone, Gavin. My parents barely talk to me, my siblings avoid me, and I have no friends. I'm all alone. Anne-Marie, I forgave you a long time ago, but there's no going back, I said firmly. You have your child. He can keep you warm at night. That's cruel, Gavin, she said, her voice tinged with hurt. No more cruel than the lies you're telling me, I responded, unyielding. I'm not lying, Gavin. I want another chance. It's what I've dreamed of all these years, she pleaded. It's never going to happen, I stated, leaving no room for doubt. Why, Gavin? I know you love me. You said you always would, she reminded me, desperation creeping into her voice. I've always loved you, but that's not enough, I admitted, feeling the weight of the truth. Why not? She asked, her voice trembling. 2 reasons. First, I'm not the same person who married you. I've changed, and you don't know me anymore. I certainly don't know you if I ever did, I explained. You do know me, Gavin. I'm still the same woman you loved. So what's the second reason? She asked, clinging to hope. That's the first honest thing you've said. But here's the second reason, then a question. You wanted someone else, and I let you have him without a harsh word, because I loved you. Since I left, I've gone to law school, passed the bar, started a new career, and built a new life. But I haven't been with another woman since our last time together. So tell me, how many men have you been with while you've been pining for me? Anne-Marie couldn't even look me in the eye. You see, Anne-Marie, I knew you were telling the truth. But back then, I didn't realize that the woman I loved was a lying, cheating person. How could I ever trust you again? Why would I even want to? Give me one reason why I'd let you back into my life that wouldn't just benefit you. If you can do that, maybe we have a chance. She cried quietly as I stood up to leave. That's what I thought. Goodbye, Anne-Marie. 3 months later, I saw them again, while heading back to Omaha for business. Everything was going smoothly, and Miguel and Maria were enjoying their new home. Seeing them so happy warmed my heart. The women serving customers at the coffee kiosk giggled and smiled this time. I was deep in my phone when they called my name. Mr. O'Connor? A voice called out, catching my attention. Yes, can I help you? I responded, turning to face them. At first, I didn't recognize the two women, but then it clicked. Oh, right. How did it go? I asked, recalling our previous interaction. Fine, Mr. O'Connor, the brunette replied. We wanted to thank you, but we didn't know how. It's Gavin, and no thanks are necessary. I'm just glad it worked out, I said with a reassuring smile. The brunette, a pretty woman named Amy with curly hair and a friendly smile, spoke while her cousin, Lydia, a shy blonde, stood quietly beside her. As my flight was announced, I began to gather my things, preparing to board. Nice to see you both again, I said, ready to leave. Just as I was about to step away, Amy ran up and handed me a napkin with a phone number scribbled on it. We'd like to thank you properly. Will you call when you get back? She asked, her tone hopeful. Caught off guard, I simply nodded. Sure, no problem, I replied, tucking the napkin into my pocket. On big holidays, the family always gathered. Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas, 4th of July, and Cinco de Mayo. It was unusual to ask everyone to gather in September, but that's what I did. I was surprised everyone fit into the Santos' new apartment. The space was cozy but comfortable for the gathering. They all looked at me, waiting for what I had to say. It was going to be one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Maybe they wouldn't think it was my place to speak, but it felt right. As Rothschild always said, I was following my gut. I wanted everyone here, so I only had to say this once, and you all could hear it at the same time. Being treated as a full member of this family has been one of my greatest joys. Miguel and Maria, your love and support helped me through tough times, and I'll always be grateful. But I also remember that Anne-Marie was part of this family too. She shared in the joy and pain like the rest of us. She cheated on me, and I made hard choices because of that. But she didn't cheat on any of you. A few months ago, I spoke to her for the first time in 10 years. It was a painful conversation. I said harsh things to her. But what hurt most was what she told me about all of you. So, with all due respect, I need to say this. You all need to stop being little a-holes and stop ostracizing your daughter and sister. Until she's back where she belongs, I want nothing to do with you. Mr. and Mrs. Santos, I won't contact you, and you shouldn't contact me until this nonsense is over. The shocked expressions on their faces didn't bring me any satisfaction. With those words, I walked away from my foster family, unsure if I'd ever see them again. The next year was hectic, both professionally and personally. In the office, we worked at a breakneck pace that was unsustainable. After almost 8 weeks of 14-hour days and non-stop deals, Rothschild had enough. One evening in the conference room, he let us know. That's it, I'm done. I can't stand the sight of any of you. We're closed. Everyone, get out of here and don't come back for a week. I'll pay you if I don't have to see you. Then he walked out of the building. On the first day of my mandatory break, I cleaned my apartment and discovered furniture buried under piles of papers, clothes, and takeout containers. I sorted my laundry, emptying my pockets as I went, and found the napkin with Amy's number on it. By the third day, with a clean apartment and updated closet, the napkin was still sitting on my dining room table like a centerpiece, so I decided to call. I sounded like an idiot. Hello? Amy answered the phone. Yes, can I speak to Amy, please? I stammered, suddenly feeling nervous. This is her, she replied. Oh, hi, Amy. This is Gavin O'Connor. We met at the airport. You gave me your number? I reminded her, hoping she remembered. Yes, I remember you, Gavin, she said, her tone warm and familiar. Well, I know it's short notice, but would you and Lydia like to come over for dinner tonight? I thought I'd cook for you both and hear how things went with your apartment. We got kicked out of the office for a week and I'm bored, I explained, trying to sound casual. She giggled and I felt a bit embarrassed by my rambling. Gavin, we'd love to have dinner at your apartment tonight, Amy replied enthusiastically. Fantastic. Great. Can I get your address? I asked, realizing I hadn't given her the details yet. I provided my address, feeling a bit flustered but excited. Later, when they arrived, I felt much more comfortable talking to Amy and Lydia in person. Lydia was still quiet, but she made eye contact and smiled, which was more than enough to put me at ease. This is a great apartment, Gavin. Do you host parties here often? Amy asked, looking around appreciatively. My apartment was impressive, mostly because it was part of a project Rothschild and I were working on. I had jumped at the chance to buy a 3-bedroom penthouse with a fantastic view of the Strip, but I didn't mention that I also owned the building. Actually, you're the first visitors I've had, besides my boss, I admitted. Really? No girlfriend? Amy asked, surprised. Nope. I haven't even been on a date since my divorce 10 years ago, I said casually, focusing on the meal I was preparing. Amy and Lydia sat at the kitchen island, sipping wine while I cooked. Amy asked me a lot of questions, and I enjoyed the conversation. It was refreshing to talk to someone other than my boss and coworkers. As I continued cooking, I noticed both of them staring at me in shock. What? Did I say something wrong? I asked, puzzled by their reactions. You haven't been on a date in 10 years, Gavin, Amy repeated, clearly astonished. No, I haven't. I've been busy with work and studies. Is that weird? I asked, genuinely curious. Yes, Amy said emphatically, and even Lydia nodded in agreement. Well, I guess it is kind of weird, I conceded with a shrug. Jesus, Gavin, I can't believe it, Amy said, shaking her head in disbelief. It's true. Anyway, dinner's ready. Let's eat, I said, steering the conversation back to the meal. Dinner was fun, filled with laughter. I learned that Amy was in her final year studying hospitality management, and Lydia was studying English with a focus on creative writing. They were both 22 and had been living together since they were 18 when Lydia's parents passed away. Amy mentioned that Lydia liked me and would eventually open up more. The atmosphere felt a bit electric, and I wondered if they were flirting with me. I enjoyed the attention, even if it was just in my head. At the end of the evening, both girls gave me a brief hug and kiss on the cheek before leaving, with Amy suggesting we meet again soon. I jokingly said I was free for the rest of the week, and to my surprise, they showed up the next day with a picnic basket. We ate lunch on the balcony and enjoyed the day until it got too hot. Then they left for work. They took my invitation seriously. The next evening, they returned with pizza, popcorn, and a movie. They shared the couch while I settled into my favorite chair. The following day, Amy asked if they could use the pool. I assured her I'd take care of it. When they arrived, I had keys to the pool and gym for them, along with a locker. Sometimes it's good to be in charge. They had a surprise for me, too. When they came out in their bikinis, I realized I'd need to step up my workouts. After my week off, we fell into a routine. I'd work during the day, and they'd visit a few evenings a week for dinner, a movie, or just to hang out. On weekends, we found activities to do together. They also used the gym regularly, even when I wasn't there. Rothschild loved teasing me about it. If I didn't know you so well, I'd think you were dating 2 women at the same time. Give me a break, man. We're just friends, and keep your fantasies to yourself. About 4 months into our friendship, I noticed something was off. During a quiet Friday night dinner at my place, the girls seemed unusually reserved. As dinner wrapped up, the tension was too much to ignore. Girls, is something wrong? No, not really. Lydia hesitated, then spoke. Amy wants to ask you something, but we're not sure how to phrase it. Amy, you can ask me anything. I have no filter with you two. Just ask, and I promise not to be offended by my answer. Amy took a deep breath. Why haven't you ever made a move on us? Don't you find us attractive? I was caught off guard and took a moment to collect myself. You're both stunningly beautiful, but I haven't made a move for 2 reasons. First, I don't want to ruin our friendship or make you think I'm some old guy hanging around for kicks. Second, I'm not even sure I know how to make a move. I've never had the chance. Amy and Lydia exchanged a glance. Then Amy continued. Gavin, we really enjoy spending time with you, and we both like you a lot. I like spending time with you too. But Lydia and I are looking for someone special, and we want you to understand what that means. Ladies, you're both extremely attractive, and I'm sure you'll each find someone special without any problem. Lydia seemed like she wanted to say something, but Amy pressed on. Gavin, we don't want to find 2 separate special people. We want one. And we think that person might be, well, you. I was stunned. Before I could respond, Amy added, we want you to understand what we're asking. Lydia wants you to read some of her work tonight. We think it'll help you understand what we're looking for. Then we can talk tomorrow about what this means for all of us. Can you do that? I think I can. You just want me to read her stories? Yes, Gavin. And then we'll talk. I realize this might give you the wrong impression of me. I have strong beliefs about right and wrong, and I treat the people I care about with kindness and respect. I believe in live and let live, as long as no one is getting hurt. However, I can also be tough when necessary, especially in business. Rothschild called it my Jekyll and Hyde quality, giving people a head start but not hesitating to retaliate if crossed. I wasn't like this before Anne-Marie broke my heart. Her betrayal made me fiercely loyal to those I trust and ruthless to those who betray me. For a long time after the divorce, I had little interest in romance. The pain of the divorce consumed me, and anything that reminded me of Anne-Marie was unbearable. I coped by focusing on my studies and work. It took years for the pain to fade. I had missed out on a lot of life experiences because I met the love of my life so young. I had never asked a girl out, never had a one-night stand, and didn't know how to attract someone. Fear of rejection held me back. I was confident in many things, but thanks to Anne-Marie, I felt insecure about relationships. 10 years passed, and I began to think I'd never get the chance to try something new. With that mindset, I read Lydia's stories. They were beautifully written, full of vivid imagery and well-drawn characters. I learned a lot about Lydia from her writing. The next day, the girls arrived around noon. I was worried I might ruin our friendship. After getting drinks and snacks, we settled in the living room. Amy got straight to the point. Lydia and I aren't involved with each other sexually. Okay, that's important to know, but honestly, I hadn't thought about it. Lydia smiled as Amy continued. We've always looked out for each other. We're not just cousins, we're best friends. When we started getting interested in boys, we'd talk about what we liked and what we wanted. I've always been drawn to sweet, caring guys, while Lydia has been attracted to more assertive alpha types. The guys she dated were great in bed, but often treated her poorly on dates. Even though I understood her attraction, I didn't want her to get hurt. They sat together, holding hands. Then our worst fears came true. One of Lydia's boyfriends became too aggressive, and a few weeks later she found out she was pregnant. The pregnancy didn't go well, and they had to terminate it for her health. Complications arose, and Lydia can't have children. Tears filled their eyes. We had always dreamed of our children playing together. We were only 19, and that dream ended before it could start. But I love Lydia more than a cousin, more than a friend. We decided our dream didn't have to end. We would share my children and raise them together as co-mothers. They looked at me, gauging my reaction. I was moved by Amy's selflessness. It was one of the saddest, kindest, and most beautiful stories I'd ever heard. They smiled softly. But then we had another problem, finding the right person. The guys I liked were too weak for Lydia, and the ones she liked were too arrogant for me. We needed someone special, kind, yet confident. And then we met you, Lydia whispered, speaking to me for the first time. My heart raced. Amy continued. You helped us without asking for anything in return. It was one of the nicest things anyone had done for us. As we got to know you, we realized you might be the one we were looking for. We decided to be honest with you, even if it meant risking our friendship. I was stunned, realizing I'd been offered a life with both of them. This is a lot to take in. I need some time to think. Can we take a break and talk more over the weekend? Of course, Gavin, we understand, Amy replied, and they left quickly. I already knew my answer, but wanted to give them a thoughtful response. They had shared something deeply personal, and I wanted to respond in kind. Later that afternoon, I ran some errands, then returned to my apartment and sent a text to Lydia before calling Amy. Hello? Amy answered. Hi, Amy, it's Gavin. I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me tonight, I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. In the background, I could hear Lydia's phone ringing, followed by her surprised sigh. Gavin, I'd love to have dinner tonight, Amy replied warmly. Great, I'll pick you up at 7 o'clock, I said, feeling a sense of anticipation. After I hung up, I waited for Lydia's response. The message I had sent her was riskier. Be at my place at 6:15. Don't be late. You'll be staying the night. Her reply came quickly and simply. Perfect. When I arrived to pick up Amy, I was momentarily speechless. She looked stunning in a little black dress. I handed her a bouquet of white lilies. Wow, you look amazing, I said, genuinely impressed. Thank you, Gavin, for the flowers and the compliment, she responded with a smile. Our evening was romantic. We shared wine and sushi at one of her favorite restaurants, then went to a nightclub for drinks. We talked about our dreams, future plans, kids, and family. By the end of the night, we had bonded deeply. As we walked through a park holding hands, I couldn't shake a lingering worry. What's bothering you, Gavin? Amy asked, sensing my unease. Why me, Amy? I'm over 10 years older than you, divorced, and every eye was on you tonight. You could have anyone, I confessed, my insecurity slipping out. Gavin, you'll figure it out soon. But for tonight, can you accept that you're the one? There's no one else for me, she reassured me. Yes, I can live with that. Thank you for a wonderful evening, Amy, I said, feeling more at ease. No, Gavin, thank you, she replied, squeezing my hand. On Easter Sunday, I found myself in my old church, feeling out of place. I had converted to Catholicism to marry Anne Marie and was a faithful parishioner during our marriage, but it felt strange to be there again. I'd been sitting alone for about 15 minutes when someone sat down next to me. "This seems like a good place for confession. Forgive me, Gavin, for I have sinned," Anne Marie said, breaking the silence. "Anne Marie, I forgave you a long time ago," I replied, turning to face her. "I know, Gavin, but you forgave me when I didn't deserve it, when I wasn't even sorry. Now I understand the pain I caused you. I wish I could take it all back. I always thought you deserved someone better. I'm so sorry I couldn't be the woman you deserved. Thank you for giving me my family back. My dad told me it was because of you." "Thank you, Anne Marie. I appreciate your apology. You're always welcome." Mass went well, and Easter brunch was enjoyable. But as the day went on, I realized there was no longer a place for me in the Santos family. It was time to move on. When it was time to leave, there were tearful goodbyes. Maria Santos hugged me at the door, understanding more than she said. She placed her hand on my cheek, closed her eyes for a moment, and then whispered, "God bless you, Micho. I will miss you." My personal life was far from normal. For months, Amy, Lydia, and I had settled into an unusual pattern, spending most of our time together as a close-knit trio. If they had lived with me full-time, we might have spent only a few hours more together each week. I was very happy dating Amy, though our relationship hadn't progressed beyond kissing. She believed we'd both know when the time was right, and I agreed. The oddest part was that she had no problem making me tense and then sending me to Lydia for relief. Lydia, for her part, blossomed under this arrangement. Amy told me that Lydia had thought I was perfect from the start. Lydia needed guidance, which made her feel safe and cared for, and I gradually took over that role from Amy. The turning point was the flowers. I hadn't thought much about giving them flowers, but it felt right. I gave Amy flowers on our first date and at random moments because it was romantic. Lydia's flowers were a thank you, delivered separately due to circumstances. My first date with Amy was wonderful, but as I returned to Lydia, I worried I wouldn't meet her needs. I needn't have worried. Over the next few months, I thought a lot about how to win Lydia over, but that first night, instinct took over. When Lydia walked in with the biggest smile, holding her flowers, I knew I'd done the right thing. As I left Omaha for the last time, I felt a deep satisfaction. I had survived Anne Marie's betrayal, started a new life, and built a career. But something was still missing: real happiness. On the way home, I made a stop, bought 2 things, and quickly returned. When I got home, Amy and Lydia were happy to see me, and we had a light, fun dinner together. I hoped to make our lives even better. After dinner, as they cleaned up in the kitchen, I watched them working together, enjoying the task simply because they were together. "I know why we haven't had sex," I said. Lydia turned to look at me, while Amy kept her eyes on the sink. "When we make love for the first time, it will be to create life, to share a piece of ourselves for a common purpose. That's why we'll be together. But there's an even more important reason. You'll be giving Lydia and me something we can't get on our own. A child." Lydia smiled through her tears. "I think you've been waiting for me to realize this, and you've waited long enough." I knelt down and pulled out a box. Lydia began to jump with excitement as I opened it. Amy slowly turned, tears in her eyes. "Amy, will you marry me?" "Yes, Gavin, I will. I'll love you forever and give you everything I have." Amy and Lydia hugged first, showing how close they were and how much we all needed each other. I slipped the ring onto Amy's finger, and Lydia admired it. "That's a beautiful ring, Gavin. You're not left out, Lydia. You're a vital part of our lives." I pulled out a second box containing an ankle bracelet with a diamond set in a Celtic knot with 3 birthstones: ruby, sapphire, and amethyst. "Lydia, we love you and need you. Please don't ever leave us." Amy was crying, but Lydia was calm as I fastened the bracelet around her ankle. "I'm home, Gavin. I'm not going anywhere." We were married 3 months later in a small ceremony with Lydia beside Amy and Rothschild next to me. 6 months later, Aidan James O'Connor was born. Twins Sophia Marie and Stephen Michael followed, and then baby Olivia Rose. The boys looked like me. Sophia was a tiny version of Amy, and Olivia was a clone of Lydia. Their bond was instant and unbreakable. Were Amy and I jealous that Olivia treated Lydia like her only parent while we were like a beloved aunt and uncle? Not at all. Amy and I lived as husband and wife, but Lydia was always close. My journey to happiness took time, but I found my place again. Our life together was as perfect as any relationship could be. I loved Amy, Lydia, and our children. Amy loved me, Lydia, and the kids. Lydia loved Amy, needed me, and gave our children a mother's love. We've never shared our lifestyle publicly, and only our closest friends know the truth, but we live a very happy life together.
Welcome to my channel. Support our channel by subscribing. Your subscription helps us grow and create more intriguing content like this. Now, let's dive into today's story. The story begins with Lucas, a 40-year-old architect from Milan who has worked his way up to a respected position in a prominent firm. Lucas and his wife, Sofia, have been together for over a decade and live in a beautiful neighborhood in Rome with their 6-year-old son, Marco. From the outside, they seem like the perfect family, enjoying the fruits of Lucas's hard work and dedication. Yet, in recent months, Lucas has noticed a distance growing between him and Sofia. He assumes it's due to the stress of his long work hours and is determined to spend more time with her and their son. Lucas feels that Sofia has been growing increasingly distant, especially in the past year. She's been avoiding his calls, spending more time out of the house, and going on frequent outings with her friends. She used to share details about her day, but now she's often evasive, giving vague answers about where she's been. Lucas, while feeling concerned, brushes it off as a phase and reassures himself that they'll get through it. After all, he believes that love and dedication will mend any temporary rift. This leads into the central conflict. Lucas's growing unease about Sofia's behavior, which he has been ignoring for too long. It creates an emotional hook as viewers feel Lucas's internal struggle and empathize with his efforts to maintain his marriage. Just as he resolves to make changes, fate has a harsh twist in store. With his suspicions slowly growing, he's about to discover that Sofia's distance hides a truth that will shatter the life he's been working so hard to build. This opening sets a dramatic tone, hinting at the betrayal and heartache that's about to unfold. To give context to their marriage, the story delves into Lucas and Sofia's shared history. They met in their early 20s at a university in Florence, where they shared a passion for art and architecture. Sofia's charm and vivacious personality were what initially drew Lucas in, and her warmth seemed to balance his serious, methodical nature. They married soon after graduation and built their lives on the belief that they could overcome any hardship. Lucas became deeply committed to his work, wanting to provide the best for his family and make Sofia proud. Over the years, however, Lucas's career demands only intensified. Working on prestigious projects in architecture required him to travel frequently and meet with high-profile clients. Although this brought financial security, it also meant that he often came home late and missed important family moments. Lucas believes Sofia's growing resentment may be because of his absences and resolves to work on improving their relationship, unaware that there's a darker reason for her behavior. In recent months, Sofia's actions have raised red flags, but Lucas has tried to rationalize each one. He notices she's always on her phone, texting someone and laughing at messages she won't share with him. When he asks her about her days, her responses are brief and avoidant. Sometimes she even returns home with a faint perfume that isn't her usual scent. Despite these signs, Lucas convinces himself that she wouldn't betray him. Setting up the background shows Lucas as a dedicated but naive husband who believes his marriage will survive his demanding career, unaware of Sofia's unfolding betrayal. One evening, while Lucas is preparing a presentation for a client, his friend Giovanni texts him, mentioning that he saw Sofia and their neighbor, Alessandro, entering a nearby hotel together. Giovanni isn't the type to gossip, but he felt it was important to let Lucas know. Lucas, thrown by this information, tries to calm himself, initially dismissing the notion. He tells himself it must be a misunderstanding, maybe a chance encounter or something entirely innocent. But his mind keeps circling back to the strange behaviors Sofia has shown recently. Unable to shake the feeling, Lucas replays the details. Alessandro is a well-known figure in their neighborhood, a single, charismatic man in his late 30s who has always been friendly with both Lucas and Sofia. However, Lucas recalls some moments that suddenly make him uncomfortable. The way Alessandro would linger a little too long in conversation with Sofia, how she would laugh at his jokes with a spark in her eyes, and how Alessandro always seemed to be around when Lucas was away. While Lucas doesn't want to assume the worst, these thoughts fester, leading him to suspect there's something more than friendship between Sofia and Alessandro. Lucas decides he needs to find out for sure, but doesn't want to confront Sofia without solid evidence. So, he devises a plan to see if there's any truth to Giovanni's claim. This building suspicion makes the audience feel the tension along with Lucas as he balances his hope for a misunderstanding with his dread of uncovering something devastating. The suspense grows, and the viewer is drawn deeper into Lucas's emotional turmoil and the need to know the truth. Lucas decides to investigate during his next scheduled client meeting, which coincidentally takes place at the same hotel Giovanni mentioned. The meeting is set for the following week, and Lucas plans carefully, making sure his schedule seems normal so as not to alert Sofia. When the day arrives, Lucas checks in at the hotel early, positioned in the lobby where he has a clear view of the entrance. He tells himself that if he's wrong, he'll use this moment to rebuild his marriage. If he's right, he'll confront Sofia with the truth. As he waits, his heart pounds with a mix of fear and determination. Within an hour, he sees Sofia walk into the hotel, holding Alessandro's arm. Lucas's heart drops. They walk to the reception desk, laughing, clearly comfortable with each other. His worst suspicions are confirmed. Taking out his phone, Lucas snaps a few discreet photos to capture evidence of their affair, his hands shaking with a mixture of shock and heartbreak. This scene captures Lucas's pain and disillusionment as he watches the woman he loves betray him. His world begins to shatter as the reality of his wife's affair unfolds before him. The evidence he gathers is not out of vengeance, but as a way to protect himself from further betrayal. The emotional weight of this discovery is immense, as Lucas realizes the depth of Sofia's deceit. With photos in hand, he leaves the hotel, feeling numb yet determined to confront her with what he's found. That night, Lucas decides to face Sofia with the evidence. He waits for her to return home, struggling to keep his emotions in check. When she arrives, he calmly asks her about her day, giving her one last chance to tell him the truth. But Sofia, unaware of what Lucas has seen, gives him the same vague answers, dismissing his questions as if nothing is wrong. Lucas then takes out his phone and shows her the photos he took at the hotel, stating that he knows everything. Sofia's reaction is not what he expected. Instead of guilt or regret, she becomes defensive and furious, accusing him of spying on her and invading her privacy. Her response shocks Lucas, who expected at least a hint of remorse. She denies the affair at first, then, realizing the evidence is irrefutable, shifts her stance, blaming Lucas for neglecting her and causing her to seek companionship elsewhere. The confrontation escalates, with Sofia twisting the blame onto Lucas, making him question his own role in her betrayal. This confrontation highlights the emotional complexity of the situation, where Lucas is faced not only with betrayal, but with Sofia's refusal to accept responsibility. Her manipulation and deflection show her true character, as she tries to turn the tables on him. The scene ends with Sofia storming out, leaving Lucas to process the overwhelming pain of losing not just his wife, but also the trust he thought he shared with her. Days after the confrontation, Lucas is served with an unexpected legal notice. Sofia has filed harassment charges against him, claiming he's been stalking and harassing her since discovering the affair. She alleges that Lucas has been threatening her, creating a hostile environment at home, and following her movements. Lucas is dumbfounded. He never imagined Sophia would go to such lengths to protect herself and smear his name. The once loving woman he married has now become an antagonist in his life, intent on destroying his reputation. Lucas realizes Sophia's accusations are part of a larger scheme. Filing harassment charges could give her leverage in a potential divorce, possibly winning her sympathy, financial support, and custody of their son, Marco. The gravity of the situation begins to weigh on him as he contemplates the impact on his career and his standing in the community. In his line of work, reputation is everything, and these allegations could ruin his life's work. Seeking advice, Lucas reaches out to a lawyer, Elena, who specializes in cases involving false allegations. Elena explains that although it's a painful situation, they can fight back by gathering as much evidence as possible. Together, they begin to compile records of Lucas's movements, witness testimonies from friends who have observed Sophia's behavior, and, most crucially, the photos Lucas took at the hotel. Despite feeling betrayed and hurt, Lucas realizes he must maintain his composure if he wants to prove his innocence and regain control of his life. This twist emphasizes Sophia's desperation to manipulate the narrative in her favor, turning the audience against her and increasing empathy for Lucas. The story of personal betrayal to one of survival and justice as Lucas faces the false charges and strategizes to defend himself. It's a new layer of conflict that deepens the emotional intensity, showcasing Lucas's resilience and determination to clear his name. Determined to clear his name, Lucas fully commits to his defense. He gathers every piece of evidence he can find, going through old messages, tracking his whereabouts on the days Sophia claims he harassed her, and securing witness testimonies. His friend Giovanni agrees to be a witness, recounting the moment he saw Sophia and Alessandro together at the hotel. Lucas also manages to retrieve text messages between him and Sophia that show her cold, dismissive responses whenever he attempted to discuss their relationship or offer solutions to mend their bond. The legal battle takes its toll on Lucas, both mentally and financially, as the costs mount. However, he refuses to back down, knowing that this is his chance to reclaim his life. As the court date approaches, he feels a mix of anxiety and hope, knowing that his entire reputation and future depend on proving his innocence. In a bid to keep his spirits high, he starts focusing on Marco, making sure his son is shielded from the conflict as much as possible, determined that the boy should not be caught in the crossfire. Meanwhile, Lucas begins noticing cracks in Sophia's story. Her accusations seem increasingly flimsy, lacking concrete evidence and relying on emotional manipulation rather than facts. Friends and family who initially sided with Sophia begin to question her narrative as Lucas's truth becomes clearer. It becomes evident that Sophia's accusations are a calculated attempt to gain sympathy, possibly even intending to paint herself as the victim to justify her affair. This stage showcases Lucas's resolve and intelligence, highlighting his decision to protect himself against slander while maintaining a sense of dignity and composure. Viewers feel his struggle, rooting for him as he fights to protect his reputation and the relationship with his son. The day of the court hearing arrives, and Lucas stands before the judge, his heart racing as he presents his side of the story. His lawyer, Elena, presents the evidence piece by piece, painting a clear picture of Sophia's betrayal, her affair with Alessandro, and her attempts to manipulate the narrative through false accusations. Giovanni's testimony supports Lucas's claims, and the photos Lucas took at the hotel provide irrefutable proof of Sophia's infidelity. Elena expertly argues that Lucas's actions were never invasive or harassing, but rather the natural reaction of a husband betrayed. Sophia, on the other hand, falters under questioning. Her statements are inconsistent, and she becomes visibly nervous as Lucas's evidence exposes the truth. Alessandro is also called to the stand, and under pressure, he reluctantly admits to the affair, solidifying Sophia's dishonesty in front of everyone present. As the truth unfolds, Sophia's initial confidence crumbles. It becomes evident that her story was crafted to defame Lucas and that her accusations were merely a tool to manipulate the legal system for personal gain. By the end of the hearing, the judge dismisses the harassment charges against Lucas, noting Sophia's deceit and lack of evidence. This moment marks the climax, where justice is served and Lucas is exonerated in front of his peers, friends, and community members who were once doubtful of his innocence. It's a triumphant moment, bringing closure to the tumultuous journey Lucas has endured. This climactic showdown in court captivates the audience, delivering a powerful message about resilience and the importance of truth in the face of adversity. With the court case resolved, Lucas files for divorce, bringing a legal end to his marriage with Sophia. The judge's verdict also impacts Sophia's settlement rights, reducing her claims to financial support due to her false accusations and misconduct. Lucas regains his reputation, and his colleagues, clients, and community rally around him, acknowledging his strength and integrity throughout the ordeal. Although he has lost a marriage, he emerges with a renewed sense of self-respect and clarity about what he values. In the weeks following, Lucas focuses on rebuilding his life and healing emotionally. He dedicates more time to Marco, ensuring that his son feels loved and supported. The divorce, while painful, allows Lucas to start anew, free from the toxicity and deceit that once clouded his life. Reflecting on the journey, he realizes he's stronger and wiser, determined to surround himself with genuine, honest people and prioritize his relationship with his son above all else. This conclusion offers a sense of redemption, closure, and new beginnings. The audience feels relieved for Lucas, knowing that he has emerged victorious despite the challenges he faced. It's a fitting resolution that reinforces the themes of justice and personal growth, leaving viewers with a positive and hopeful outlook on moving forward after betrayal. To close, the video delivers a heartfelt message about valuing trust and integrity in relationships. Lucas shares a personal reflection, encouraging viewers to listen to their instincts and prioritize honesty. He thanks them for following his journey, expressing gratitude for the support he received throughout his ordeal. Finally, he invites viewers to share their own stories, comment on the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. This ending not only provides a touching farewell, but also engages the audience, inviting them to connect personally with the story. It reinforces the universal theme of resilience, leaving viewers with a sense of fulfillment and an appreciation for Lucas's strength and determination.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Kathy's lawyer stood up, his voice measured and practiced. Your Honor, my client wishes to request a counseling session in an effort to repair the marriage. She believes that with the right support, this relationship can be mended. My lawyer stood immediately, his voice confident and unwavering. Your Honor, Mr. Porter has made it clear that he does not wish to reconcile. The facts of this case speak for themselves. Mrs. Porter has engaged in multiple extramarital affairs and is currently pregnant with a child fathered by one of these individuals. My client's intention is to move forward with the divorce. There was a murmur in the courtroom, whispers that seemed to echo my own disbelief at how this had unfolded. I clenched my hands together, keeping my expression neutral. I needed to stay strong. Kathy's lawyer pushed on, though there was a hint of desperation in his tone now. While my client acknowledges past mistakes, she believes that a counseling session could bring closure and understanding to both parties, possibly healing some of the damage. I felt a surge of frustration. I leaned forward slightly, my voice steady but firm. Your Honor, I appreciate the court's time, but I have no interest in counseling. Too much has happened, and this marriage is beyond saving. I just want the divorce. Kathy's lawyer glanced at his notes before addressing the judge again. Your Honor, beyond the marriage itself, there is also the welfare of the unborn child to consider. My client believes that counseling is essential for ensuring that all parties, especially the child, have a chance at stability and support. My lawyer shifted slightly but stayed silent, waiting for my cue. I couldn't keep my frustration contained any longer. I stood, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. I have no interest in raising that devil spawn that isn't mine. That cheating 304 can find her father and let him raise it. I don't want to attend any counseling with that woman. Mr. Porter, one more word and I will hold you in contempt of court, he yelled at me. A quiet gasp moved through the room, and I caught a glimpse of Kathy's face, pale and tight-lipped. The judge's eyes narrowed as he looked at me over the rim of his glasses, a long pause filling the space as if he were weighing every word. Mr. Porter, the judge said, his voice firm, while I understand your feelings, this court must consider all factors, including the emotional welfare of everyone involved. I am ordering both parties to attend counseling sessions as a final attempt to address these issues constructively. I will not attend, I scowled. I am ordering 1 month of counseling 2 sessions per week. You will attend, Mr. Porter, or else. He glowered at me for a moment, then banged his gavel again, that is all. A week later, the room was silent, tense, with an air that seemed to buzz with unspoken words. The counselor, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor and glasses perched on the edge of his nose, sat across from us, hands resting lightly on a notepad. Kathy sat next to me, looking down, twisting the fabric of her sweater nervously. Ben, Kathy started, her voice shaky. I just want to say. Don't, I snapped, my voice cold and sharp. Keep your mouth shut. I don't want to hear anything from you. The counselor, Mr. Hensley, glanced between us, his expression neutral but attentive. Ben, I know this is tough, but we're here to try to open a dialogue. Even if it's uncomfortable, speaking up can help us move forward. Will you give it a try? I crossed my arms, my jaw tightening. I'm here because the judge ordered it, not because I want to talk. I'll attend, but I don't have to participate. A brief silence followed, Mr. Hensley's eyes searching mine for any sign of willingness. When none came, he sighed, shifting his notepad slightly. I understand this is painful, but communication is a step toward understanding, even if it doesn't lead to reconciliation. After an hour, okay doctor, good session. See you Thursday? I'm canceling the sessions and sending my report to the judge. Even better. I left the office. The judge was not pleased. Give me one reason why I should not hold your client in contempt, he growled at my lawyer. Your Honor, you ordered my client to attend the sessions. He attended the first session in accordance with the order. It was the counselor who called off the rest of the session. The counselor's report clearly states that he made no attempt to engage in the session. He put in headphones and ignored them for the entire time. The judge responded. The order was that he attend, my lawyer returned. He attended. Given that the counselor felt that there was no benefit in continuing, I would like to request that you grant the divorce according to the petition. Not on your life. The judge said, I am ordering 4 weeks of counseling. Mr. Porter will attend, and he will participate. The office was set up in exactly the same format as before when I arrived. 2 chairs about a foot apart faced the doctor's desk. He sat behind it. The desk was bare, barring a yellow legal pad and a picture of a pretty woman I would guess in her mid-30s, and a child that looked about 6 years old. Mr. Porter, the doctor said, please, take a seat. Once again, I started to move the chair. Kathy put her hand out to stop me and I jumped back. If you dare to touch me, I would consider it an assault and would punch your teeth in your stomach. You understand, bitch? Kathy gasped, pulling back. I went back to moving the chair and then sat in it. Once again I got out my phone. Mr. Porter, the judge ordered that you participate in the session. I know, I said, my voice steady. I'm using my phone to record the session to prove my participation. My lawyer mentioned that some counselors might have their own agendas. Since my soon-to-be ex-wife has already been seeing you for some time, I feel you may have developed a relationship with her that could work against me. The counselor, Mr. Hensley, tilted his head slightly. And what if I do not wish you to record the sessions? He asked, his tone calm but direct. Then I'll go back to court and request a different counselor. I replied firmly. I have that option. The only reason I didn't do that already was to avoid more delays. I just want to quickly get rid of this 304. Mr. Hensley turned his attention to Kathy, who was sitting with her arms crossed, eyes averted. Kathy, how do you feel about the sessions being recorded? She shrugged, barely looking up. Whatever, she said with a hint of impatience, waving her hand dismissively. Can we just start? The air in the room seemed to settle, a reluctant agreement hanging between us all. Okay then, Mr. Hensley said, folding his hands in front of him. What I would like to do to start. Before we start, I interrupted, my tone cold. Can I ask a question? Of course, he said, his voice measured. You can ask questions at any time. I may ask you to hold off during certain points, but right now, go ahead. He offered a small smile that I didn't return. Have you slept with her yet? I asked bluntly. Kathy gasped, a sharp intake of breath that cut through the room, but Mr. Hensley's expression didn't change. No, Ben, he said evenly, Kathy and I have not had, nor will we have, any kind of sexual contact. It would be highly inappropriate, even if I were not already very happily married. Does that answer your question? I looked at him for a long moment before nodding. I believed him, despite the fact that Kathy seemed to have been involved with nearly every man she'd encountered in the past year. All right then, Mr. Hensley continued smoothly. As I was saying to begin, I'd like to set our expectations. Since I have already spoken to Kathy on a few occasions, I would like her to outline what she hopes to achieve in these sessions and what her desired outcome would be. Ben, I'd ask that while she's talking, you refrain from comments or questions until the end. Once Kathy has shared her goals, I'll ask you to do the same. My goal is to see her get an incurable STD and watch her die a slow and painful death, to go to her grave and piss on it. That is the ultimate dream that I have. Mr. Hensley shook his head and looked towards Kathy, who was already shaken by my response. Talk to me, Kathy, Mr. Hensley said, his tone gentle. Tell me what you would like Ben to hear. Kathy took a shaky breath, her voice wavering as she began. I want him to hear how sorry I am for hurting him. I know what I did was wrong, but it was just that he spent so much time at work and on his business trips, and I was lonely. I realize how much pain I caused him, and if I could go back and change the past, I would do anything to make it right. I love him more than anything else in the world. I know we can get past this if he'd just give me a chance. I would show him that I can be the best wife a man could ever want. We could raise this child together, give him a wonderful life, maybe even a sibling. I want us to be a family again. I know we can make it through this. Mr. Hensley offered a small nod and a faint, supportive smile. Thank you, Kathy. Now, Ben, what would you like to say? She can write down her feelings on a piece of paper, then roll it in and stick it up her butt, far enough to choke on it. Feelings mean crap to me, and she is already dead to me. Kathy started to cry and ran out of the room. Please collide with something and die, I said as she ran out. That was not helpful, Mr. Hensley remarked, his voice steady but edged with concern. I don't want to be helpful, I spat back. That lying, cheating woman slept with half the city for a year, got herself pregnant, and then tried to pass the baby off as mine. If I hadn't already been suspicious and demanded a DNA test, I'd be stuck right now paying for someone else's kid. Tell me, doctor, how exactly should I be acting? It's natural to be angry, Ben, Mr. Hensley replied evenly, but you need to look past the anger to remember what you shared. I glared at him, my rage simmering. Do you even know what the hell you're talking about? I snapped. Have you ever had the love of your life, the person you trusted with every piece of yourself, who you die to protect, betray you so completely that you question your own sanity? How can someone who says they love you hurt you so deeply that it pushes you to the brink of wanting to end it all? And did you notice she hasn't even once truly apologized for what she did? Not for screwing all those men, not for the endless lies, not for getting herself pregnant, and not even knowing who the father is. The only thing certain is that it wasn't the person who should have been giving her a child. Me. So don't sit there with your sanctimonious, and your book knowledge, telling me I need to move past my anger. Right now, my anger is the only thing keeping me going. Just let me get this cheating 304 out of my life, so I can try to rebuild from the wreckage she left behind. I stood up, eyes locked on Mr. Hensley. Does that count as participation? I snarled as I turned and walked out. I asked Kathy to allow us to have this session without her, Mr. Hensley said as I walked into his office the following week. I think we may be able to achieve more on a one-on-one basis to start. As long as this still counts towards the court-ordered counseling, I'm more than happy to be in the same room as that bitch, I replied, plopping down in a chair and setting an A4 envelope on my lap. Can we try to refrain from name-calling, please? It's not constructive and only gets in the way, he said, his tone calm. I'm not here to be constructive. I just want to get through these sessions and finally get that unfaithful person out of my life for good. I never wanted to be here. She's just hell-bent on causing me as much pain as possible. She doesn't want the divorce because the prenup leaves her with nothing, so she's trying to force me into taking her back. It's not happening. And what about the child? Mr. Hensley pressed. He's innocent. Surely, he shouldn't be punished for. I don't give a shit about that kid. By your logic, I should take in every stray that couldn't keep her legs closed and ended up pregnant. Those kids have nothing to do with me, and neither does this one. Why are you so set on believing there's only one outcome here? He asked, his voice steady. You clearly loved her deeply. That kind of feeling doesn't just vanish overnight. Your anger is masking it right now, but once it settles, and trust me, it will, you'll find there are still feelings you can build on. Feelings that could help restore your relationship, maybe even make it stronger. That stupid smile was back again, and I felt the urge to punch him. Time to give him a taste of his own medicine. I gestured toward the picture on his desk. You have a nice family, I said. Been married long? We're not here to discuss my personal life. 11 years, if my sources are correct. Childhood sweetheart, married right out of college. Waited to have kids, and then little Ethan came along. What is he, 9 now? That picture must have been taken a couple of years ago. How did you? He started to ask. But did you know your darling Cheryl has her own secrets? I continued. Did you know that when she says she's at Pilates class on Wednesdays while you're working, she's actually at the Motel 8 on Patterson, screwing her personal trainer? That is completely ridiculous, he stammered, but I could see he was shaken. He had gone very pale. Really? I said, pulling several photographs from the envelope and slapping them down on his desk one by one. They showed a pretty slender woman entering a hotel room with a young muscle-bound man, his arm wrapped around her waist as they gazed lovingly at each other. I then pulled out a DVD and slapped it down too. There's footage from inside the room if you want actual proof of what they were getting up to. It's pretty graphic, so I wouldn't watch it if I were you. I made that mistake when I got my PI report. Those images will haunt me for the rest of my life. He looked like he might be sick. Oh, and one more thing, I added, pulling out a DNA report from the envelope. No, he said quietly. Please God, no. It appears that the fitness instructor isn't the first. I guess he would be too young to have fathered Ethan, but whoever the father is, it isn't you, I said quietly. He stood up and bolted for what I assumed was a bathroom off his office. I could hear him retching violently. Now do you understand? I asked when he finally sank back into his chair, tears streaming down his face. He looked at me with dead eyes. Do you see the pain she caused me and why I need to get her out of my life? I pressed. He nodded, looking utterly defeated. Good, I said, smirking a little. Now there's just one more thing you need to know. His face drained of color as he looked at me with dread. There's more? He asked, sounding pitiful. It's all fake. I shot back. None of what I just showed you is true. As far as I know, your wife is as loving and faithful as you thought she was, and Ethan is your son. But the photos, he stammered. Photoshop, I replied grimly. Amazing what you can do with some Facebook posts and a little time and effort. If you had them examined by anyone with half a brain, they'd tell you they're all fakes. I pulled out the originals I'd created them from. The DVD? He asked, his voice trembling. Blank, I replied flatly. And the DNA report? Is actually the DNA report for that cheating 304's baby. I just changed the names and dates, I said, watching his expression shift from confusion to disbelief. He sat there, stunned, fresh tears beginning to stream down his face. Why would you do that? What did you think you could possibly achieve by wrecking my marriage and my life? He asked, his voice cracking. That was not my intention, I shot back. That's why I told you right away it was all fake. I never wanted you or your family to suffer permanent harm. I just wanted you, for once, to truly understand the pain I went through. The feelings of loss, anger, and hurt. You had a taste of it for a few minutes. I'm still living with it. Your brief misery is my daily reality now. Forcing me to sit here with that bitch, listening to her spout her shit about how she loves me and wants me back, just means I have to relive the pain over and over again. There are laws against cruel and unusual punishment. Why don't they apply here? I just want to move on, pick up the pieces of my life, and get on with it. Why can't you and the courts let me do that? I started gathering the documents from the table and shoved them back into the envelope. I'll leave this with you to dispose of, I said, my tone softening just a fraction. I am actually sorry to have had to do this, but I needed you to understand. Your Honor, I have the report from the court-mandated counseling that my client was instructed to attend, my lawyer said, addressing the judge with a mixture of formality and urgency. I have a copy, the judge growled, his eyes narrowing as he flipped through the pages. It appears that the counselor believes, even after only 3 sessions out of the mandated 8, that this marriage is beyond saving. For the well-being of all involved, including the child, the best course would be to allow its dissolution. Yes, Your Honor. I would request that you order the divorce be completed as per the petition, my lawyer pressed. The judge stared at me for a long moment. I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead, refusing to meet his eyes, not wanting to reveal the turmoil inside. So ordered, he said finally, banging his gavel with a finality that echoed in the courtroom. The judge glanced at the financial records before him and delivered his ruling with a tone that made it clear this was not a matter to be taken lightly. There will be no alimony, he stated, looking up at us. Ms. Kathy earns more than Mr. Porter, and both parties will retain their pre-marriage assets. The remainder will be divided 50-50. No alimony meant that I wouldn't be financially tethered to Kathy any longer. Kathy had lost her job, a fact that didn't surprise me in the least. One of her lovers had turned out to be a client, and I could only imagine the mess that would have ensued from that. I couldn't help but smirk internally at the irony of her situation. Then, as if it couldn't get any more ridiculous, I heard that she had filed a suit against 7 men, requesting the court to mandate DNA tests. I couldn't believe it. Here she was, dragging multiple men into the fray, all in an effort to sort out who the father of her child might be. The aftermath of the paternity test had set off a chain reaction that I couldn't have predicted. News spread like wildfire. All 7 wives of the men Kathy had been sleeping with filed for divorce against their husbands. I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction at the chaos she'd unleashed on everyone involved. It was like a karmic whirlwind, and I was just a bystander, watching the fallout. Last I heard, one of those angry wives had stormed into the courthouse and attacked Kathy. The image of her breaking Kathy's nose was almost poetic in a way. After everything Kathy had done, seeing her face bloodied and bruised felt like some kind of cosmic justice. I had to admit, I almost laughed when I heard about it. It was hard to feel any sympathy for her at that point. She had turned my life upside down, and now she was reaping what she had sown. Kathy had given birth to her child, but that didn't change how I felt about her or the situation. The cases against those 7 men were still lingering in the courts, and I wondered how long it would take for all that to finally be resolved. Honestly, I was just glad to be out of the mess. Kathy showed up at my house unannounced one afternoon, her face set with a mixture of desperation and entitlement. I could tell from the moment she walked through the door that she was on a mission to convince me to marry her again. She started spouting all this nonsense about how she had changed, how she realized what a mistake she had made, and how much she loved me. It was almost laughable considering everything that had happened. I stood my ground, refusing to let her manipulate me again. Kathy, it's over. We're done. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them, I told her firmly, trying to keep my cool. But she wouldn't let it go. She was relentless, her voice rising with every word, trying to make me feel guilty for not considering a reconciliation. Just then, Nancy, my girlfriend, came out from the kitchen. She must have sensed the tension in the room because she didn't hesitate to confront Kathy. You need to leave. You're not welcome here, she said, her tone sharp and unyielding. Kathy's response was explosive. She launched into an abusive tirade, spewing venomous insults and trying to demean Nancy, clearly believing she still had the power to intimidate. I could see Nancy's eyes narrow as Kathy continued her verbal assault. I felt a surge of protectiveness for Nancy, but I knew Kathy was unhinged, and I didn't want to escalate the situation. Then it happened. In a moment of rage, Kathy lunged at Nancy, trying to hit her. That was a huge mistake. Nancy, who was no stranger to standing her ground, expertly sidestepped Kathy's wild swing and retaliated with a brutal counterattack. She kicked her and threw her on the floor. I stood there, half in shock and half in admiration, as Nancy quickly gained the upper hand. She was fierce, and Kathy, who had always relied on her manipulative tactics, was clearly outmatched. Before I knew it, Nancy had Kathy pinned against the floor, her anger palpable. It was surreal, watching Kathy, the woman who had once held so much control over my life, reduced to this. I could hardly believe what I was witnessing. Get the hell out of our lives, Kathy. You're not welcome here, Nancy shouted. In the midst of the chaos, I pulled out my phone and called the cops. Kathy was screaming by this point, but her words fell on deaf ears. The cops arrived shortly after, and Nancy calmly explained everything. They stepped in, quickly assessing the situation. Kathy, still defiant, tried to put on a show, claiming she was the victim, but it didn't take long for the officers to see through her act. As they handcuffed her and led her away, I felt an odd mix of emotions: relief, satisfaction, and a sense of finality. It was the end of an era for me, the last remnants of her toxicity being dragged out of my life. I turned to Nancy, who was still shaking with adrenaline. You were incredible, I said, feeling grateful to have her by my side. Just doing what had to be done, she replied with a hint of a smile. In that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. I was ready to leave the past behind and embrace a future with someone who truly valued me. someone who wouldn't try to tear me down. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
I'm in my early 50s. Recently, the most shocking event of my life unfolded. It all happened during a solo trip when I met a woman. I've been agonizing over whether to confess this to my wife and ended up posting about it online. I met my wife in college, where we were both members of the same club. Initially, we were just close friends, but after graduation, we started dating as we began to see each other in a romantic light. My wife is incredibly diligent and kind-hearted. She's the second of 3 sisters, and by far the most hardworking among them. Even after having 2 kids, she managed to work 3 jobs, which I found utterly impressive. Despite my urging her to take it easy, she was adamant about saving for our retirement, even if it meant cutting back on sleep. Honestly, I'm worn out from working. I've been doing IT work for years, with no weekends off, and it's been overwhelming. I find comfort in talking to my wife more than hanging out with friends. Gradually, I've come to rely on her, pouring out my work-related grievances to her. She's always been my rock, comforting me by saying, "If it's too hard, just quit. I'm earning too, you know." Her words felt sincere, and they gave me the strength to keep going. Our kids have grown up to be incredibly smart and independent, especially the eldest, who started enjoying their university life this year. I'm currently a team leader at my company, with retirement on the horizon. Thankfully, the company offers college tuition support, so that's a relief. We just need to cover the youngest's tuition, and my wife has been working lightly. We've paid off our apartment loan and even bought a new car. For over 20 years, we've both been working, and our kids would save up their allowance to buy us gifts on our birthdays and occasionally clothes. Despite what seems like a happy life to others, I've felt a strange emptiness. I became interested in hiking after a conversation with a colleague about how the warmer weather has made it a popular activity, even for day trips. A quick search on a major portal site confirmed that there are indeed day trips available, and they weren't expensive. There's a mountain I've always wanted to visit, but it's a 3-hour drive, so I hesitated. Fortunately, there was a bus service heading there, so I took a day off work and booked the trip. I headed to the bus terminal early in the morning, took a tour bus to the mountain, and returned on time as scheduled. I told my wife I was taking a day off work to go hiking and pulled out my hiking backpack. She lightly tousled my hair and packed me water, cucumbers, and sandwiches. I left quietly before the kids woke up and caught the bus. The destination, a mountain name, was displayed on the front of the tourist bus, and I found a seat in the back. Most of the passengers were strangers to me, many in their 60s, dressed in colorful hiking gear and boots, sitting excitedly. A man in his early 30s sat next to me. We exchanged brief glances before I gazed out the window and fell asleep. This was my first trip taken just for myself. Upon reaching the mountain's base, I had been hiking for a while when someone called out to me, "Excuse me, I'm suddenly feeling weak. Do you have any candy or chocolate?" It was someone I had seen on the bus, older than me, apparently hiking alone. I quickly found 2 chocolates in my pocket and handed them to her. She thanked me profusely after a while, saying she felt better, likely avoiding a hypoglycemic shock. We continued climbing slowly. About 30 minutes later, she asked if I minded her joining me. I had wanted to hike alone and enjoy nature, but I couldn't refuse, so we hiked together. She told me she had been coming to this mountain for 5 years, knowing an easy trail and guiding me through it. At the summit, while I ate the cucumbers and sandwich, she offered me an iced Americano. I thanked her and asked about her earlier condition. She admitted that she would have been in trouble without me, having missed her insulin shot in a rush to catch the bus and forgetting to bring candy due to changing clothes. She thanked me repeatedly, revealing she had severe diabetes requiring daily insulin injections. Looking at her, I thought she had aged gracefully, her quiet demeanor and actions endearing. She suggested hiking together again, knowing many great mountains. I was about to say I'd bring my wife next time, when she offered to treat me to a meal at the bus terminal. Without thinking, I agreed. After descending the mountain, we hopped on a tour bus back to the terminal. Being someone who isn't picky about food, I let her decide on the menu. Instead, she suggested we grab a drink, to which I readily agreed. Despite having diabetes, she mentioned she occasionally indulges in alcohol but manages it through exercise, assuring me there was no need to worry. Living near the terminal, she shared that her children were all married in their late 20s and her husband, who conducts business abroad, visits only about twice a year. The distance had dulled their emotions, she admitted. Mid-drink, her eldest son called, saying, "Mom nearly had a fall during today's hike. But fortunately, the person who helped her out is with her right now. Yeah, don't worry about me. I'll take good care of myself." Before hanging up, she was incredibly upbeat and positive. She expressed a desire to share her plans and asked for my number. We exchanged contacts and parted ways. A few days later, she reached out, asking if I'd be interested in joining her for a hike on Saturday via a tour bus. Without consulting my wife, I agreed. After booking through the link she sent, we sat together on the bus and enjoyed the hike. My wife, enjoying her alone time, trusted me amidst the frequent incidents occurring in hiking groups. Despite feeling a bit guilty, I chose not to dwell on it. I found myself deeply attracted to her understanding and empathetic nature. Honestly, my wife seemed older than her age, while she appeared at least a decade younger than hers. On our third hike, we ended up creating a secret. I lied about going on another hike, dressed in my hiking gear, and went to her place instead. She complained about her husband barely being home and acting like a lodger when he was. I helped alleviate her grievances, and we've been seeing each other regularly since. People might question what I'm doing with an older woman, but honestly, I feel more compatible with her than with my wife, bringing a sense of novelty. My wife, who used to hike solo, now seems healthier, which somehow makes me feel guilty. I plan to prepare a special event for our upcoming anniversary to reassure her. Juggling 2 women has been challenging, but I'm more inclined to enjoy this situation.
Welcome back to Cheating Tales Lab. Thank you for tuning in. We've got another gripping story for you today, and we hope it keeps you entertained. Let's not wait any longer. Let's dive into the story. Franklin Browning's flight touched down at 2:17 p.m., a full 3 hours earlier than expected. As he strode through the airport, his mind raced with possibilities. The breakthrough he'd made on his sustainable water filtration project could change everything, not just for his career, but for millions without access to clean water. He hailed a cab, barely noticing the driver's attempt at small talk. Franklin's fingers tapped restlessly on his briefcase. Inside were the notes that could revolutionize his field. He couldn't wait to share the news with Stella. She'd been supportive through all the late nights and missed dinners. Now he could finally show her it was worth it. The cab pulled up to their modest apartment building. Franklin paid quickly, grabbed his luggage, and bounded up the stairs 2 at a time. He fished for his keys, then paused. Stella's voice drifted through the door, low and intense. "I can't take it anymore, Anthony," she was saying. "Franklin's always working, and when he's home, he's obsessing over his world-changing ideas. What about my dreams? My need for adventure?" Franklin's hand froze on the doorknob. His mind reeled, trying to process what he was hearing. Stella continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "You're right, Anthony. I deserve better. Someone who can give me the life I want." The world tilted sideways. Franklin steadied himself against the wall, his breath coming in short gasps. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything they'd been through together. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. Then he turned the key and stepped inside. Stella whirled around, her face draining of color. "Franklin, I didn't know you were home," she stammered, fumbling to end the call. "Clearly," Franklin replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He set down his briefcase with deliberate care. "I think we need to talk." Stella's eyes darted around the room, looking everywhere but at her husband. "Talk? About what?" "I was just on the phone with a friend." "A friend?" Franklin's tone was flat. "And does this friend have a name? Anthony, perhaps?" Stella's posture stiffened. "You were eavesdropping?" "I came home early to surprise you," Franklin said. "Seems I'm the one who got the surprise." The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Then something in Stella's expression shifted. The fear vanished, replaced by a cold anger. "Fine," she spat. "Yes, I was talking to Anthony. And you know what? I'm glad you heard. I'm sick of pretending everything's okay when it's not." Franklin fought to keep his voice level. "And what exactly isn't okay, Stella? I thought we were building a life together, working towards our goals." Stella laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Our goals? You mean your goals? Your precious work that always comes first. When's the last time you asked about my dreams?" "I've always supported your dreams," Franklin said, struggling to understand. "I thought we were in this together." "Together?" Stella's voice dripped with scorn. "You're so naive, Franklin. While you've been chasing your fantasy of saving the world, I've been suffocating. Anthony sees me for who I really am. He wants to give me the life I deserve." Franklin's jaw clenched. "The life you deserve? And what life is that, exactly?" Stella's eyes glittered. "Adventure, excitement, passion, all the things you've forgotten about while you're buried in your work. Anthony's taking me to Bora Bora next month. When's the last time you even took me to dinner?" The words hit Franklin like a physical blow. He thought of all the nights he'd worked late, convinced he was doing it for their future. Had he really been so blind? "So that's it?" he asked, his voice tight with anger and hurt. "You're throwing away our marriage for a vacation?" Stella stalked towards him, her face flushed. "It's not about the vacation, Franklin. It's about the life I deserve. Anthony can give me that. You can't." She paused, then delivered the final blow. "I want a divorce." Franklin stood rooted to the spot, his mind reeling. The life he thought he knew was crumbling around him. But beneath the shock and pain, something else stirred. A cold, hard resolve. "A divorce," he repeated, his voice devoid of emotion. "Is that really what you want, Stella?" She nodded, chin lifted defiantly. Franklin's eyes narrowed. "Then you'll get one. But don't think for a second this ends here." He turned on his heel and strode to the bedroom, yanking open drawers and shoving clothes into a suitcase. Stella followed, her bravado faltering slightly. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Leaving," Franklin said shortly. "You made your choice. Now you can live with it." He zipped the suitcase closed with more force than necessary. As he brushed past Stella, she grabbed his arm. "Franklin, wait. We should talk about this. About arrangements." He shook off her hand. "We'll talk through our lawyers. You wanted a divorce, Stella. Congratulations. You've got one." With that, he walked out the door, not sparing a glance behind him. The cool evening air hit his face as he emerged from the building. He hailed a cab, giving the address of a nearby hotel. As the city lights blurred past the window, Franklin's mind raced. The excitement of his breakthrough seemed a lifetime ago. Now, all he could think about was how quickly everything had fallen apart. But beneath the turmoil, a steely determination took root. Stella thought she could discard him so easily? She had no idea what was coming. Franklin Browning was not a man to be trifled with, and he would make damn sure she remembered that. The weeks that followed were a blur of work and legal meetings. Franklin threw himself into his project with renewed vigor, channeling his pain into determination. The water filtration system became his obsession, his reason for getting up each morning. Stella, for her part, seemed intent on making the divorce as painful as possible. Her demands were outrageous, her attitude spiteful. Franklin weathered it all with a cold detachment that unnerved even his own lawyer. At the office, Franklin's colleagues noticed the change in him. Gone was the easygoing researcher, replaced by a man of singular focus and drive. No one dared to slack off or question his methods. All except Susan Chun. Susan had been Franklin's friend and fellow environmental engineer for years. She watched his transformation with growing concern. One night, as the office emptied and Franklin remained hunched over his computer, she decided to intervene. "Franklin," she said softly, approaching his desk, "are you okay? You've been here day and night." He looked up, his eyes bloodshot but focused. "I'm fine, Susan. Just focused on making this project work. It's all I have left." Susan hesitated, then pulled up a chair. "You know that's not true. You have friends here. People who care about you." Franklin's expression softened slightly. "I appreciate that, Susan. I do. But right now, I need to concentrate on this. It's the only thing keeping me sane." Susan nodded, understanding in her eyes. Then she straightened, her tone becoming more businesslike. "Well, in that case, I have some news that might interest you. There's a major corporation interested in our filtration system. They want to meet next week." For the first time in weeks, a spark of genuine excitement lit Franklin's eyes. "Really? Who?" "Global Hospitality Group," Susan said. "They're looking to implement eco-friendly systems in their resorts worldwide. If we can impress them, it could be huge for us." Franklin nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Then we'd better be ready to blow them away." As Susan left, Franklin reflected on their friendship. She'd been his rock through this ordeal, always there with a word of encouragement or a fresh perspective on their work. For the first time since that fateful night, he felt a glimmer of hope. He turned back to his computer, fingers flying over the keyboard. Stella thought she'd broken him. Anthony thought he could steal Franklin's life. But they had no idea what he was capable of. This project wasn't just about clean water anymore. It was about proving to the world, and to himself, that Franklin Browning was a force to be reckoned with. As the night deepened, Franklin worked on, fueled by determination and the promise of redemption. The city slept, unaware that within its midst, a man was forging a plan that would change not just his life, but countless others. And when the dust settled, those who had underestimated him would learn the true cost of their mistake. 2 years had passed since that fateful night when Franklin Browning's world shattered. The pain of betrayal had long since hardened into cold determination. Now, he stood in a sleek boardroom, facing a panel of executives from Global Hospitality Group. His patented water filtration system, once just a dream, was about to become a reality. Franklin's eyes swept the room, taking in the expectant faces. He'd rehearsed this presentation countless times with Susan. Every word, every slide, was perfectly calibrated for maximum impact. He wouldn't let this opportunity slip away. "Gentlemen," Franklin began, his voice steady and confident. "What you're about to see will revolutionize water usage in the hospitality industry." For the next hour, Franklin laid out his vision. He spoke of sustainability, of drastic reductions in water waste, of the potential to bring clean water to drought-stricken regions. The executives leaned forward, their eyes gleaming with interest. As Franklin concluded, a heavy silence fell over the room. Then, slowly, Gilbert Guerrero, the CEO of Global Hospitality Group, began to applaud. The other executives followed suit. "Mr. Browning," Gilbert said, standing to shake Franklin's hand. "That was truly impressive. Your system could indeed revolutionize water usage in our resorts worldwide. Franklin allowed himself a small smile. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. I'm glad you see the potential. Gilbert nodded, then paused, his expression turning serious. We're not just interested in licensing, Mr. Browning. We want to acquire your company outright. Franklin's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment he'd been working towards for years. But he couldn't show his excitement. Not yet. I'm open to discussing terms, Mr. Guerrero, Franklin said carefully. But I have one condition. Gilbert raised an eyebrow. Oh. Franklin met his gaze steadily. I want a controlling stake in your Bora Bora resort. The room fell silent. Gilbert's eyes narrowed slightly, a mix of confusion and intrigue on his face. That's an unusual request, Mr. Browning. May I ask why? Franklin maintained his composure, his voice cool and professional. Let's just say I have a personal interest in seeing this particular property succeed with our new technology. Gilbert studied Franklin for a long moment, then slowly nodded. I see. Well, Mr. Browning, you've certainly piqued my curiosity. Why don't we discuss this further over dinner? I have a feeling there's an interesting story behind this request. As the meeting adjourned, Franklin felt a surge of triumph. He was one step closer to his goal. Stella and Anthony thought they'd left him behind, broken and defeated. They had no idea what was coming. Later that evening, over a lavish dinner, Franklin laid out his vision for the Bora Bora resort. He spoke of making it a showcase for sustainable luxury, a model for the entire industry. Gilbert listened intently, clearly impressed by Franklin's passion and knowledge. You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Browning, Gilbert said as they shook hands at the end of the night. But I think we can make this work. Our legal team will draw up the paperwork. Welcome to Global Hospitality Group. Franklin allowed himself a genuine smile. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. I look forward to our partnership. As he left the restaurant, Franklin pulled out his phone and dialed Susan's number. Well? Susan's voice was tense with anticipation. We did it, Franklin said simply. They're buying the company, and I'm getting Bora Bora. Susan's whoop of joy echoed through the phone. Franklin, that's amazing. I knew you could do it. We did it, Susan, Franklin corrected her. I couldn't have done this without you. There was a pause on the other end of the line. So, what happens now? Franklin's voice hardened slightly. Now? Now we prepare for Phase 2. Weeks of intense negotiations and paperwork followed. Franklin threw himself into the work, fine-tuning every detail of the agreement. Finally, the day arrived. Franklin stood in Gilbert's office, pen in hand, ready to sign the final documents. Mr. Browning, Gilbert said, a note of admiration in his voice. I must say, you've impressed me at every turn. Are you sure you won't reconsider my offer to join our board of directors? Franklin shook his head, smiling slightly. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero, but I prefer a more hands-on approach. I'll be heading to Bora Bora next week to oversee the implementation personally. Gilbert nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course. Well, I look forward to seeing the results. Good luck, Mr. Browning. As Franklin signed his name with a flourish, he felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place. Stella and Anthony had no idea what was coming. The flight to Bora Bora was long, but Franklin hardly noticed. His mind was consumed with plans and strategies. As the plane touched down, he took a deep breath. This was it, the moment he'd been working towards for 2 years. Franklin stepped off the plane, the warm tropical air enveloping him. A man in a crisp suit approached, hand extended. Mr. Browning? I'm Arthur McCarty, the resort manager. It's an honor to have you here. Franklin shook his hand firmly. Thank you, Mr. McCarty. I'm looking forward to seeing the property. As they walked towards the waiting car, Arthur launched into an enthusiastic description of the resort. Your filtration system is already making waves in the industry, Mr. Browning. We've had inquiries from other resorts asking about it. Franklin nodded, only half listening. His eyes scanned the surroundings, taking in every detail. Somewhere on this island, Stella and Anthony were living their dream life. He allowed himself a small, cold smile. Not for much longer. The resort was impressive, a sprawling complex of luxury bungalows and pristine beaches. As Arthur led him on a tour, Franklin made mental notes. He'd need to know every inch of this place for his plan to work. They were passing the main bar when Franklin froze. There, behind the counter, was a familiar face. Anthony Levine, looking considerably less polished than Franklin remembered, was mixing drinks for a group of tourists. Their eyes met. Anthony's face drained of color, his hand fumbling the bottle he was holding. "Is something wrong, Mr. Browning?" Arthur asked, noticing Franklin's sudden stillness. Franklin's voice was cool when he replied, "No, nothing at all. But I think we need to review the staff roster. I have some concerns about quality control." Arthur looked confused but nodded. "Of course, sir. We can do that right away if you'd like. Tomorrow will be fine," Franklin said smoothly. "For now, I'd like to see my accommodations. It's been a long flight." As they walked away, Franklin could feel Anthony's eyes boring into his back. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smirk. Let him sweat. Later that evening, Franklin sat in his luxurious suite, poring over the staff files Arthur had provided. Anthony's was near the top, a flimsy cover story about his bartending experience. Franklin snorted. It was almost too easy. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Arthur, looking nervous. "Mr. Browning, I hope I'm not disturbing you. But after our conversation earlier, I did some digging. It seems there are some irregularities with a few of our employees' backgrounds, particularly the bartender you noticed." Franklin leaned back in his chair, expression neutral. "Is that so? Tell me more, Mr. McCarty." Arthur shifted uncomfortably. "Well, sir, it appears Mr. Levine may have exaggerated his qualifications, and there are some gaps in his employment history that don't add up." "I see," Franklin said slowly. "And what do you recommend we do about this, Mr. McCarty?" Arthur straightened, seeming relieved to be on familiar ground. "Standard procedure would be to suspend him pending a full investigation. If the discrepancies are confirmed, termination would be the next step." Franklin nodded, a plan forming in his mind. "Let's hold off on that for now, Mr. McCarty. I have a feeling Mr. Levine might have some interesting information to share. Keep this to yourself for the moment. I'll handle it personally." Arthur looked uncertain but nodded. "Of course, Mr. Browning, whatever you think is best." As Arthur left, Franklin turned to look out the window at the moonlit beach. Everything was falling into place. Anthony was working a dead-end job, clearly struggling, which meant Stella couldn't be far behind. Franklin's lips curved into a cold smile. It was time to spring the trap. The next evening, Franklin made his way to the resort's main restaurant. He'd chosen a table with a clear view of the entrance, ordered a bottle of expensive wine, and settled in to wait. He didn't have to wait long. Just as his main course arrived, he saw her. Stella walked in, and Franklin felt a jolt of satisfaction. She looked tired, her designer clothes from 2 years ago now looking slightly shabby. The glowing, carefree woman who'd left him was gone, replaced by someone who looked desperate. Stella froze when she spotted Franklin, her eyes widening in shock. She recovered quickly, though, stalking over to his table with a look of fury on her face. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low but intense. Franklin leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Good evening to you too, Stella. You're looking, well." Stella's eyes narrowed. "Don't play games with me, Franklin. What are you doing in Bora Bora?" Franklin took a sip of his wine, savoring the moment. "Oh, didn't you hear? I own this place now. Well, part of it anyway. Funny how things work out, isn't it?" The color drained from Stella's face. "You, what?" Before Franklin could respond, Anthony appeared at Stella's side. He puffed out his chest, trying to look intimidating despite his bartender's uniform. "Listen, man, you can't just—" Franklin cut him off, his voice sharp as a knife. "Actually, I can. Anthony, consider this your termination notice. Effective immediately." Anthony's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Stella's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this," she sputtered. "We'll fight you." Franklin stood, his voice low but firm. "This is karma for you both. Get lost now, or I'll have security escort you out." As if on cue, two large security guards appeared nearby, watching the scene carefully. Stella grabbed Anthony's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "This isn't over, Franklin," she hissed. "You'll regret this." Franklin watched them go, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction. Phase 1 was complete. Now, the real game could begin. As he signaled for the check, Franklin's phone buzzed. It was a text from Susan. How did it go? Franklin allowed himself a small smile as he typed his reply. Perfectly. They never saw it coming. He pocketed his phone and stepped out into the warm night air. The stars twinkled overhead, and the sound of the ocean filled his ears. Franklin took a deep breath, savoring the moment. For 2 years, he'd worked tirelessly towards this goal. He'd rebuilt his life, created a revolutionary product, and positioned himself perfectly for revenge. But this was just the beginning. Stella and Anthony thought they could break him and walk away unscathed. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Franklin Browning was no longer the naive, trusting man they'd betrayed. He was stronger now, harder, and he was just getting started. As he walked back to his suite, Franklin's mind raced with plans. He had them exactly where he wanted them, desperate, angry, and ready to make mistakes. All he had to do now was wait for them to play into his hands. The game was on, and Franklin intended to win, no matter the cost. The week following Franklin's dramatic confrontation with Stella and Anthony was tense. The resort buzzed with whispers and sidelong glances. Franklin could feel the weight of countless eyes on him as he moved through the property, but he refused to show any sign of weakness. Stella and Anthony, for their part, were not content to slink away in defeat. They began a campaign of whispered insinuations and outright lies, targeting both staff and guests. Their goal was clear: undermine Franklin's authority and paint him as unstable and unfit to run the resort. "I heard he had a mental breakdown," Stella confided to a group of wealthy guests by the pool. "That's why he suddenly bought into this place. He's not right in the head." Anthony, meanwhile, focused on the staff. He cornered a young housekeeper in a secluded hallway, his voice low and urgent. "Browning's going to run this place into the ground. He doesn't know the first thing about hospitality. We'll all be out of jobs within a month." The rumors spread like wildfire. Franklin could see the uncertainty in the eyes of the staff, the wary glances from guests. He knew he had to act fast to regain control of the narrative. On Friday morning, Franklin called an all-staff meeting in the resort's largest conference room. As employees filed in, he stood at the front, projecting an aura of calm confidence. Once everyone was seated, he began. "Good morning, everyone. I know there have been some interesting stories circulating this past week," Franklin said, a wry smile playing on his lips. "I thought it was time we addressed them head-on." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "Yes, I'm new to the hospitality industry. Yes, I made my fortune in water filtration technology. And yes, I have a personal history with 2 individuals who were, until recently, employed here." A murmur ran through the crowd. Franklin held up a hand, silencing them. "But I'm not here to air dirty laundry or settle old scores. I'm here because I believe in the potential of this resort, and in each and every one of you." Franklin's voice grew passionate as he outlined his vision for the future. He spoke of sustainability initiatives that would set them apart from competitors. He detailed plans for community involvement, for making the resort not just a retreat for the wealthy, but a vital part of the local economy. "I know change can be scary," Franklin said, his tone softening, "but I'm not here to sweep in and upend everything. I'm here to work with all of you to make this resort the best it can be. My door is always open. If you have concerns, ideas, or just want to chat, don't hesitate to come see me." As the meeting concluded, Franklin could see a shift in the room. The wariness was fading, replaced by cautious optimism. He'd won the first battle, but he knew the war was far from over. Over the next few days, Franklin threw himself into the work of running the resort. He was everywhere, helping in the kitchens, assisting guests, even pitching in with the groundskeeping. The staff watched in amazement as their new boss, the man they'd been told was unstable and incompetent, demonstrated a keen understanding of every aspect of the operation. Franklin also began implementing the eco-friendly practices he'd promised. New, More efficient air conditioning systems were installed. Water-saving devices were fitted in every room. Solar panels began to appear on rooftops. The results were immediate and impressive. Within a month, the resort's utility costs had dropped by 30%. Guests raved about the resort's commitment to sustainability, and bookings began to surge. Arthur McCarty, the resort manager, couldn't hide his amazement. "Mr. Browning," he said one evening, shaking his head in wonder, "I've never seen anything like this. The staff morale is through the roof. Guests are happier than ever, and we're saving a fortune on operating costs." "How did you do it?" Franklin allowed himself a small smile. "It's simple, Arthur. I listened to the people who know this place best, you and your staff, and I applied a little ingenuity. That's all." As word of the resort's transformation spread, Franklin received a call from Gilbert Guerrero. "Franklin, my boy," the CEO boomed, "you've outdone yourself. The board is thrilled. We're thinking of implementing your methods across all our properties." Franklin's success was a bitter pill for Stella and Anthony. Their attempts to undermine him had backfired spectacularly, leaving them more desperate than ever. As they sat in their dingy rented apartment, Stella's face was a mask of fury. "This can't be happening," she seethed. "That pathetic loser was supposed to crash and burn, not become some kind of hospitality genius." Anthony paced the small living room, his expression dark. "We need to do something more drastic. Something he can't talk his way out of." Stella's eyes lit up with a malicious gleam. "What about the resort's computer system? If we could mess with the reservations, create some chaos." Anthony nodded slowly, a grin spreading across his face. "I like the way you think, babe. I've got a buddy who's good with computers. Maybe he could help us out." What they didn't know was that Franklin had anticipated just such a move. He'd worked closely with the IT department to set up a sophisticated honeypot trap designed to catch anyone attempting to breach the system. For 3 days, Stella and Anthony worked with their hacker friend, believing they were causing havoc with the resort's bookings. They imagined the chaos that would ensue: double-booked rooms, lost reservations, angry guests. Surely this would be the final nail in Franklin's coffin. On the 4th day, they gathered in their apartment to celebrate their perceived victory. Stella poured cheap champagne into plastic cups, her eyes gleaming with malicious glee. To the downfall of Franklin Browning, she toasted, raising her cup. Anthony clinked his cup against hers. "And to us, baby. We'll be running that place before you know it." Their celebration was cut short by a sharp knock at the door. Anthony frowned, setting down his drink. Who the hell could that be? He opened the door to find 2 burly security guards from the resort, accompanied by a stern-looking police officer. "Stella Browning and Anthony Levine," the officer asked, his voice clipped and professional. Stella appeared behind Anthony, her face pale. "Yes? What's this about?" The officer's expression remained impassive. "You're under arrest for attempted cybercrimes against the Bora Bora luxury resort." As the reality of the situation sank in, Stella's composure cracked. She whirled on Anthony, her eyes wild with panic. "You said this would work. You promised we'd get rid of him." Anthony could only shrug helplessly as the officer read them their rights, and the security guards moved in to handcuff them. As they were led away, Stella caught a glimpse of a familiar figure standing in the shadows, Franklin, watching the scene unfold with a look of grim satisfaction. In that moment, she realized the full extent of her mistake. She hadn't just underestimated Franklin. She'd created a formidable enemy out of a man who had once loved her unconditionally. The following week, as the sun began to set over the crystal-clear waters of Bora Bora, Franklin stood on the beach, letting the warm sand sift through his toes. The past 2 years had been a whirlwind of pain, determination, and finally, triumph. Now, as he watched the sky turn a brilliant orange, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. A familiar voice broke into his reverie. "Penny for your thoughts?" Franklin turned to see Susan Chan walking towards him, a warm smile on her face. He'd invited her to Bora Bora to celebrate his success, and her presence felt like the final piece of a complex puzzle falling into place. "I was just thinking about how everything turned out," Franklin said, returning her smile. "It's hard to believe, isn't it?" Susan nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It really is. Are you okay, Franklin? I mean, with everything that's happened. Franklin took a deep breath, considering her question. For the first time in years, he felt truly at peace. You know what? I really am. I lost something I thought was important, but I gained so much more. My work is making a difference, and I've learned what real loyalty looks like. He turned to Susan, his eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you for sticking by me through all of this. I couldn't have done it without you. Susan's smile widened. That's what friends are for, Franklin. So, what's next for Franklin Browning, resort owner and environmental revolutionary? Franklin chuckled, his mind already racing with possibilities. I'm thinking expansion. There's a whole world out there that could use our help. And this time, I'm not letting anyone hold me back. As they walked along the beach, the resort gleaming behind them, Franklin felt a sense of closure. He'd not just survived betrayal, he'd thrived in spite of it. The future, for once, looked brighter than ever. They paused, watching as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon. Franklin turned to Susan, suddenly aware of how right it felt to have her by his side. You know, Susan, he said, his voice soft but confident, I've been thinking. We've been such a great team, both professionally and personally. Would you like to grab dinner sometime? Not as colleagues, but maybe something more? Susan's eyes lit up, a blend of surprise and joy dancing across her features. I thought you'd never ask, Franklin. I'd love to. As they continued their walk, hand in hand, Franklin marveled at the twists and turns his life had taken. He'd lost a wife, but gained a true partner. He'd been betrayed, but found the strength to rise above it. His work was changing the world, and he'd found someone who truly appreciated and supported his vision. Franklin realized that sometimes, losing what you thought you wanted could lead you to what you truly needed. With Susan by his side and his innovative ideas changing the world, he'd finally found his true path to happiness and success. As they strolled back towards the resort, the first stars twinkling overhead, Franklin felt a surge of excitement for the future. He'd weathered the storm, emerged stronger, and now the world was full of possibilities. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he was ready to face them, not alone, but with someone who truly understood and valued him. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy him had instead been the catalyst for his greatest triumphs. Franklin Browning had not just survived, he had conquered, and the best was yet to come.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.